Hey, 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 everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a joy to be with you in this election season. Wow, 2 weeks from today, election night. But actually, every night's election night for the next 2 weeks. Every day's election day for the next 2 weeks. Early voting has begun. If you have trouble at the polls, please call 81866 our vote. 1-866 our vote. Go to vote.org, vote.org to find out where you vote, to find out if you're still registered to vote. But if you get to the polls, or even if you have questions about your voting, please call 866 our vote or go to vote.org. You can even get registered to vote on vote.org. I want to thank everyone for coming out and watching Vigilantes Inc., America's new voter suppression hitmen. We had a full house last night at Rainbow Push. It was great. Thank you, Teal Hardiman and Dr. LaShawn Latrice and Carl West for coming on out, and Greg Palast for coming on in. A lot of people had a lot to say about the election, about the movie, which is so powerful. Please go to saveyourvote.org. Saveyourvote.org. I saw Jeanette last night, and I promise you tomorrow I'm going to get up Reverend Jackson's personal endorsements here in the Chicago, Illinois, and federal races. I'm going to put that up on my page and on his page. But in the meantime, I want you to go to the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. Join Ashley King from Memphis over on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. And please, 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 everybody, hey, Mike, how you doing? Like and share, and like and subscribe on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. And on X, I'm at Santita J, and I'm also at Santita J Show, the Santita J Show. Whew, that's a whole lot. There's a whole lot going on. We've got these battleground states, and they're at play. But I'm finding out, I'm learning much more about these battleground states. I did not know that Georgia, for example, it has a winner-take-all system. Attorney Mark Fancher, brilliant social critic, lawyer, civil libertarian. I did not know that those 16, 15, or 16 electoral votes, even if someone wins or loses by a vote, they get no electoral votes. That's why we're battling over a few states, not all of the states. We've got to ask some questions, but the thing is, you can't just ask them during the election year, everybody. If this republic is going to stand, someone asked Benjamin Franklin the question, what kind of government have you given us right after the Constitutional Convention? Reportedly, it was a lady. He said, a republic, if you can keep it. Well, we're at one of those inflection points, everybody. If we can keep this, really, we have to get involved. We have to get involved. So let's look at some of these key swing states over the next few days, coming weeks. Everybody's looking at Wisconsin. Everyone is looking at Michigan. Everyone is looking at Georgia, Arizona, a few other states. But you should be worried about your own state. Get out there and vote, everybody, because you know what? Apparently, people are going to fight for this election right down to the last vote, because that's really what's going to matter. Can you imagine? That's why they're fighting so hard over these battleground states. Many of them are winner take all. Not all, but many of them are. So let's get right to it. Mark Fancher, I just saw a question. Are the polls wrong? Now, you and I are both old enough to remember when you would take this, I forget what they're called now, the polls that you would take as soon as someone came out of the polling center, and you'd ask them, exit polls, and they would ask them how they voted. Funny thing happened on the way to these machine voting machines. I mean, these electronic voting machines. Yeah, I said it because when Reverend Jackson saw this trend coming, he said this is going to be dangerous, because the veracity is something, Mark, that we would begin to question. Just given all of the mischief that you have out in cyberspace. Well, that having been said, more often than not, we see a huge variation between what is registered in what used to be the exit polls and what shows up in the machines. Okay. And to be fair, and even in the polling data that people get on the phone, sometimes people, because we're so mistrustful of all that we see, you don't want to tell everyone who you're voting for. You just rather keep it a secret. So there it is. But the question is now, are the polls that off? Do you think the polls are that off, Mark Fancher, from what you're hearing and seeing with people? Um, do you think the race is that tight across the country? What are you seeing?
Well, I think it certainly is in Michigan. Um, I think it's been a very peculiar situation that we've had here. I think
Mhm.
in that uh, the Democratic Party, I don't think, has fully appreciated the state of mind and the commitment of Arabs who have been deeply hurt and who are deeply traumatized by what's happened in Gaza. And they also have been deeply hurt and deeply offended by the way in which the Democratic Party has treated them.
Mhm.
And in the sense that it almost seems as though they're taken for granted. And for other groups, racial and ethnic groups that are accustomed to being kicked around and taken for granted, the expectations are different. For those of us who are of African descent, if we're disrespected by the Democratic Party, it comes as no surprise to us. I mean, that's been going on for generations. We know that that's what's going to happen. But in some of these communities where Arab populations are relatively new arrivals in this country, they've come in with a certain set of expectations about what the country is all about and their rights and how they will be treated and how they will be respected. And in some cases, it's almost a naive belief, our naive perception of what this country is all about and what's to be expected. And when they have found that not only has this country been involved in, this genocide in Gaza, but also that they've been met with the cold shoulder by the administration that's responsible for it, when they have not received the courtesy sometimes of an informed conversation, then they're deeply insulted and deeply offended by that in ways in which other groups might not be. So when they have said that this is too much, that we can't, our pride, our self-respect, our dignity won't allow us to sign on with an administration like this, that we can't give them our vote. Just as a matter of basic human self-respect, we can't do that. You better take them seriously. And if you have any doubts, look at what happened with respect to the primaries with the uncommitted movement. Many people sort of wrote that off. They said they heard the talk about that plan to vote uncommitted during the primaries, and I think that there were probably many in the Democratic Party who said that's just a lot of rhetoric, it's a lot of talk. They'll never actually follow through and do that. Oh, sure, they absolutely did that, and I think
In
that
21 days.
oh yes, yes. I mean, very quickly. And so when they're talking about abandoning Harris, don't take them for granted. Don't sell them short. Don't believe that they won't. And I think it's curious to me that the Democratic Party has drifted so deeply into its arrogance that it really does believe that it owns communities that and that to the extent that it's necessary that they can use fear to maintain their allegiance. And I think they probably tell themselves that, well, they say that they're going to jump ship, but when they think about the threat that is posed by a Trump administration, then they'll come back on board. They'll come home. But they have spoken quite frankly with many people in Dearborn and other Arab communities. And they say, oh, we're fully aware of what the consequences are and the possibility that there will be a Trump administration. But we'd rather that than to allow ourselves to be insulted in the way that we have.
Mhm. Well, it's just like indigenous people have not taken payouts. You know, they say, I want my land back. You can't give me money for this. And my mother has often mused aloud, well, what would that mean if we did that? Because when our children, when our loved ones are killed, and I'm not saying that you should not get compensation. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying I think we need to have a rethink about how we're doing things because you cannot be repaid. I remember my father used to come around and ask each of us, after a fashion, I told you after 12, no more Christmas presents. It's Jesus's birthday and it's going to be a religious holiday for us. It always has been that, but we want you to understand that's how we're doing this. We go to jail in the morning, celebrate with people who've been left and locked out. We have a great dinner, and thank God we're all together. And when my father would come around, when he get to me, he was like, baby, is there anything? Just, you want a little something? Daddy will take you to the store. Not violating my mother, but she gave him that space. And it was her space to give. And he said, I said, no, there's nothing really. I mean, I have what I need, most of what I want, but more than what I really always wanted was to have my father alive for the holiday. You know, what I really wanted was to have everybody alive and all of us together. He said, I hear you, baby. If one of our lights were not on our Christmas tree, it would never be the same. And when you look, you're talking to a community who are losing their loved ones every single day, or they're afraid to call home. And this, like you said, this fear, these fear politics, that's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's really, I don't see it working
Oh,
uh,
oh,
without.
it's not, and I think that it's not just Arab communities that are frustrated. I think that there is a cumulative frustration across the board, particularly among working people and poor people, and in their own ways, sometimes ways which are extremely misguided. I think they're all resisting. They're all rebelling. I think that there are many white workers who, they're not stupid. I mean, they watch this imbecile Donald Trump get up on national television and talk about Arnold Palmer, and they don't miss that. They know how ludicrous he is. But this is their way of protesting. I mean, they want to give the giant middle finger to the country,
Mhm.
and this is their way of doing it by standing with this man, regardless of the consequences. And I think that there's been much attention that's been paid to black men, and the assertion that many of them are also uh, you know jumping ship and getting on the Trump bandwagon. I
Mhm.
think in many cases it's the same kind of thinking that they too have been taken for granted. Nobody has paid attention to them. Kamala Harris has not really explicitly and expressly talked about the issues that are of most concern to them, has never earmarked certain planks in the Democratic Party platform for them. And so they feel taken for granted as well. And so they too want to demonstrate their resistance. And so their misguided way of doing it is voting for Trump. So I think that what we have is a population, a working population that's ripe for something very different, ripe for revolution. But their analysis is all out of whack. And I think that it sets the agenda and the task for those of us who would like to see us go in a different direction, to dump the duopoly and to create something new. But it will take some concentrated work to help people get their priorities back in order.
Well, I mean, what do you think? Where do you see this race going? I mean, since people are we're in a mood. We 2/3 of the American public do not trust legacy media, the corporate media, so they're not paying attention to them. I mean, that's why a lot of these people are leaving their television shows because their salaries are being slashed to bits because ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, Fox, all of them, maybe not Fox, but most of the others, they're not making the monies that they used to make because we're not watching them. People are on X, which is the piece that I heard my brother, Congressman Jonathan Jackson, explaining it today. He said that's the piece that people are ignoring about Elon Musk. People are getting their news from social media, specifically Twitter. So he's controlling, and he controls that algorithm, which means he's controlling the narrative, he's controlling the news. He said, don't let that be lost on anyone. How powerful he is, but how powerful he's allowed to be, because much, if not most of his money comes from government contracts. You know, just like Jeff Bezos. I mean, all these people, we forget we don't even know how intertwined they are with the government, Mark. So I mean, so what are we to make of this? Because it just, I listen to Washington Journal in the morning, and everybody, I talk about that. I love it because they open up the phone lines. You get a chance to hear Americans of every conceivable background, and do not, just because someone doesn't have a PhD doesn't mean they have not figured some things out. Just because someone has a PhD means that they have a clue. People are thinking. And I may not agree with all of their conclusions or even their trains of thought, but I see them reaching for information, Mark. And you see that being played out in the polls in this election as we welcome Daryl Jones to the show, who was running through the streets of the DMV to get here with us today. Praise the Lord, with his bow tie on. It's not, man, I'm with you with the turtleneck, Mark. But Mark, you were saying this is like a first for Mark not to have on a tie. What? Okay. Woo! I don't know. I'm going to have vapors.
I just gave up. I couldn't compete with Daryl, so I said, I just throw in the towel.
Like, whoa. Woo. Okay.
I mean,
it must be election season, Santita, because it's getting deep up in here.
Well, it is getting deep because you know what? He's in deep city. I mean, deep state. Oh, oops, did I say that? Oh, pun intended. You're up there in Michigan, and people really keep saying that Michigan is tighter than this. And I keep saying we got Greg Palast we're going to welcome up here too. He's just got to Georgia, where you are on your way to, Daryl. Mm-hmm. But everybody keeps saying that Michigan is this close. An activist from the uncommitted movement who we had on last week, Dr. Ahmed Ghanim, said, I was sitting in an event. I was just sitting there and they put me out, Daryl. They just put him out. You saw the young Palestinian activist. He was he was in a crowd where the vice president was speaking, and she gave him another I am speaking, although she finessed it more differently this time. She said, look, everybody, he's got
SWB audio capture, not registered.
He said, he's making a point. And I understand his point. She said, but I am speaking. And so I get the sense that she hears him, but the thing is, hearing him and all of that, that's important. Hey, Tamaris. Hey, Carol, my sister from another mister out there in Beverly Hills. And Kayla, how you doing? I just have to wonder. As strong as the Reverend Jackson said 40 years ago that the secret weapon in Michigan and throughout the country, the Arab American community, coalition politics. And they have grown, the Arab American community have grown to be an increasingly potent political force. Mm-hmm. So I find it hard to believe with the uncommitted movement, Daryl and Greg Palast, the Best Democracy Money Can Buy, New York Times bestselling author, brilliant investigative journalist. We just saw his movie last night, Vigilantes, Inc. Oh my goodness, America's new voter suppression hitman. We cannot wait to talk to you because he is back in Georgia. But Mark, I'm just wondering it just does not feel to me. I was just in Michigan last week. It did not feel like it was this close because these people are very serious about withholding their votes or about voting for someone else. Mark?
Yeah. No, I mean, it really is not a surprise. I mean, if Kamala Harris comes to Detroit and in the middle of a rally, protesters start speaking in support or in solidarity with Palestinian suffering in Gaza, and she basically tells them to shut up. I mean, you know, that's going to cause a certain reaction. If these same people, this same community goes to the Democratic National Convention and all that they're asking is for an opportunity to be heard, and they're shut out. You know, there's no opportunity for them to have a meaningful platform or a meaningful opportunity to discuss. I mean, that's going to have an impact on a community. And even I think that it's really outrageous to me that with the evidence, the recent evidence of the people in Dearborn and other Arab communities speaking very seriously about not supporting her, that while she'll make special efforts to try and corral or regroup with Black men, because the same thing is being said about them, she'll reach out to other communities where she thinks that there's some erosion in support. She doesn't even give a passing thought to trying to reach out to Arab communities and to try and to make things right with them. So the cumulative message from all of that is she really does not care about us. She's really insulted us. And she's standing there, and anytime the question is posed to her by other people, because she won't listen to us, when they ask about Gaza, her only response is, "Well, Israel has a right to defend itself." What do you expect? I mean, people can take only so much insult and disrespect before they finally let you know that they will not be treated that way.
Well, you know, I tell you that's Michigan. In 21 days, remember, they organized more than 100,000 people to vote uncommitted. And it was not simply Democrats. They organized about 20,000 Republicans too. I mean, this is a big deal. Now we've got boots on the ground in that region. It is a big deal. And I just, you know, the question was, are the polls off? Um, you know, let me, if you don't mind, Daryl, I want to ask
Mhm.
Greg Palast we had a wonderful time last night with him as we watched his movie, which, you know, Daryl, we have seen. Mark, we have seen this movie, and we saw the version that we saw last night was different than the version that we saw in Chicago because it's the completed version. And so, Mark, you got a chance to see the paragraph, or should I say the passage that President Thomas Jefferson, he wasn't president then, he was one of the, you know, one of the constructors and literal writers of the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, in which he passionately wrote about the immorality of slavery. No one talks about that. I mean, it was just so, and you kept connecting this to slavery. And I just want to say, you know, I think Mark, part of the mistake, and Daryl, part of the mistake, Daryl and Greg, part of the mistake that we all make is that we only make slavery, we've racialized it in America instead of really understanding that most Americans, if you are not part of the oligarchy, you've been enslaved to one degree or another. You know, so so congratulations on the film. Everybody loved it. But you connected our vote and voter suppression to slavery. Why is that, Greg Palast? You're on mute, but let me see. No, don't touch a thing. Don't you touch a thing. I was trying to give you a little bit of space. I got you. I got you, Greg. Okay, now you're still muted, but that's okay. Well, hold on. Daryl Jones, why is slavery connected to the vote? Why do people constantly do that?
Well, I mean, there is a connection of slavery and voting because, you know, we know.
SWB audio capture not
Uh-oh.
registered.
Uh-oh, let me put this on. Well, now we've got you, Greg.
You there, Greg?
Nope, not yet.
No, not yet.
I'm going to put him on mute for now so that we don't get that as they're working through that. And Zach is there, so, you know, Zach figured it out before. So let me say it's okay. Daryl, slavery, the vote, the connection, what is it? Why is
Yeah,
it?
I mean, you know, there are a lot of connections between slavery and voting. And one of the direct connections, obviously, that exists is that because obviously enslaved people could not vote. And once it got to the point that were permitting those that had been previously enslaved to vote, they were still intimidated. They were still intimidated by their masters, by the white majority that were there. They were also at the psychological impacts. Coming out of slavery, there were no jobs. It's not like you came out, you went straight to work or anything along those lines. And so there was still a connection that was there for many of the African Americans that had gained their freedom, yet still were under the psychological suppression of enslavement. And so we had a lot of connections that were there in that milieu, in that philosophy of thought that carries through. Interestingly, Santita, if you were to track voter suppression across America today, the states the areas and the counties that encountered lynchings today still hold a suppressed number of African Americans that vote in those areas to this day. So, when you identify where there's been lynchings in America, you will also identify suppressed votes because there's a direct correlation and combination and connection between the action of terrorizing people over the right to vote, over their existence.
SWB audio capture not
Oh,
registered.
I have to put this on mute, but keep on.
Okay, between those that were terrorized by lynching and those that today exercise the right to vote, there's a direct connection that continues, a through line that continues to this day. And so, I'm really anxious to get Greg up and get his insight on it. I can see him itching at the bit to jump in.
I know he is, but I think, can we hear you now, Greg? Not yet. No, not yet, but it's going to be okay. I'm going to see if I can get Mark Fancher back. I know he was going to have to leave us very shortly. The connection between slavery and the vote. I mean, because you have a lot of people, and we didn't really see this in the 60s, but certainly we read about it. In order to suppress the Black vote and to depress Black people, gangs in our community were paid to put graffiti all over the community and tell people about the futility, the foolishness of voting and why their votes did not matter and all of that. And when you saw this movie, you saw how your vote really does matter, how being involved in the system, getting involved, even as we talk about revolution, Mark, it's not going to be televised. You can't watch it from afar. You got to be involved, Mark. But slavery just continues to loom large in the American consciousness and in the body politic.
Yeah, after slavery was abolished and during the Reconstruction period, it was an amazing time in the political history of the formerly enslaved. They did enter electoral politics in large numbers to the extent that they had a Black lieutenant governor. They dominated the South Carolina legislature. There were Black people in the U.S. Senate, Black people in the U.S. House of Representatives, and it scared white America to death. And the white workers were extremely resentful about the fact that happened. And it's those kinds of political gains that were made during Reconstruction, which triggered the birth of the Ku Klux Klan and Night Riders and other terrorists who were determined to, quote unquote, redeem the South for white people. And so they embarked on a campaign of terror and essentially drove people out of office. And during the long period of Jim Crow, then they prevented Black people from voting. And to the extent that Black people were able to somehow establish that they had a right to vote, then they erected barriers and obstacles to them with literacy tests and all kinds of other obstacles to their participation. And it's always been that way, primarily because they realized the potential of a community that's organized and educated and engaged. But I think that unfortunately we've had a country which has drifted into a state where the oligarchy has so locked down the electoral process that the type of gains, the type of dominance, the type of opportunities that Black communities first had during Reconstruction may not be possible to recapture anymore. And, I think it's for that reason that we have to look for alternatives. I mean, there are many people who talk about, financing a household. They say they want multiple streams of income because they don't want to rely too heavily on one job, that they have other things that they're doing or that they're engaged in to make sure that the money's coming in from a number of different directions. I think politically, oppressed communities need to do the same thing. They have to have multiple streams of political engagement,
Mhm.
and to be very strategic about how they pursue them.
But I agree with that. I mean, I know you can't stay with us, much longer, but when you bring that up, it's almost blasphemous. You're a heretic. But the fact is, in democracies, you have many other choices, Daryl.
Mhm.
And Reverend Jackson said, and I keep pivoting to Reverend because Reverend really has, Dr. King, they say, was the architect, Reverend was the builder. Dr. King gave him an assignment, pulled him out of University of Chicago, getting his master's in theology, in divinity, excuse me. A semester before he graduated, he did go back and do that. But it really was, he said, I can teach you more about theology than you can ever learn in that seminary. You need to come with me. Thank goodness, because Mark, he only had 3 more years to live. And what you saw was, this is before Dr. King died, he began to see just how poisoned the system was. That this was a house on fire. Should I send my people in, or should we stay outside and be the firemen who put the fire out? That's the Dr. King my parents went to work for. The one who said, hey, 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 the immorality, the war, the racism, the materialism, the classism. I mean, all of these isms, they're killing us, and they're going to kill us. Morally, we're bankrupt. We're spending all this money on war. We're not spending money on programs of social uplift. If you talk about that now, and you're a blasphemer. If we demand that, Mark, of our candidates, you need to leave Kamala, Barack alone, because we just need to get them there. I mean, we just had that discussion a few days ago. You remember that, Daryl? And I said, wait a minute. We can't afford to just let someone go in. I've got to have some demands. I got to have some self-respect. The Jewish community does not allow that.
Yeah.
The Catholic community does not allow that. White women don't allow that. What are we doing?
Yeah, and I really think that Dr. King best exemplifies, or it provides a lesson to us about the predicament or the situation that I think many voters find themselves in now.
Absolutely.
What many voters look at is they say, look, we've got a situation where we have to choose the lesser of two evils. We have to eat Trump. And, Kamala Harris isn't all that we want her to be in so many different ways, but we've got to go that way. That's being quote unquote pragmatic. That's playing a political game. And one of the things that Dr. King never did is he never played political games.
Mhm.
He operated strictly on principle and morality, no matter what the cost. So he was facing a similar predicament. He had been through the early stages of his campaign against Jim Crow and segregation, and had the backing and the support of the powers that be, because what he was doing was not only opening up America for Black people, but he was also opening up those communities as markets for big
Yeah.
big business that wanted to have access to them. So they supported him 100%. But in his honesty, in his principled approach to struggle, what he realized is that it was about more than colored only signs, that he was living in a country that disregarded human life and was taking lots of it in Southeast Asia and Vietnam. He realized that he was operating within a system that prioritized and glorified greed. He was living in a country that separated people along racial and other and ethnic and other lines. And he wanted to speak out against it. And what is never talked about is that the people closest to him, when he said that he was going to speak out against the Vietnam War, told him, you can't do that because the lane has been established for you. You can be a civil rights leader, a race leader, but you can't speak on that. And so you have to choose the lesser of two evils. Yes, you want to speak out, but if you do, it's going to be counterproductive. It's going to destroy us. We're going to be thrown out. Lyndon Johnson will no longer be our backer. We won't have the support that we've had. We won't be able to continue and pursue our civil rights agenda because you're going to destroy it and waste it by talking about something you really have no business talking about. When faced with those consequences, Dr. King said, I really have to do what my conscience tells me to do. And I have to speak out against this war, and I will do it. And he paid a price, okay? Because a year after he did it, he was shot down like a rabid dog. And many people would point to that and say, see, he should have stayed in his lane. He should not have stayed in his lane because ultimately God makes sure that justice prevails. And so that war ended. Dr. King was elevated to hero status. And in so many ways, he came out on top, even though he physically was not around for that. I think that in many ways, our community has lost that. We have unfortunately drifted into trying to imitate our oppressors and thinking that we have to play the game of compromise, the game of politics. And in the course of doing that, we compromise who we are. We compromise our very humanity and our principles and our morality because we think we're afraid. We look at the consequences and we say, well, we don't want to endure hardship. I mean, thank God that when Diane Nash was in Nashville and they came back and reported to her that one of the first freedom rides had been set upon by a racist mob, that they had pulled people out of the bus and beaten and killed them and set the bus on fire. Her response was not, well, we can't do that. It's too dangerous. Her response was, get some more brothers and sisters, put them on that bus, and let's get back down there and finish that ride. And that's what we got to do. We got to finish.
That's right. And she and her husband, James Bevel, who was the rebel Bevel, and my parents were part of that wing of Dr. King's staff, said, no, we're going to organize these children. Since their parents are scared, we're going to organize the children. And you got to have that spirit. Things are going to change. We've got Greg Palast with us, but I have to tell you, Mark, it's just because even where we're heading, even as some of us are excited about making history, I want us to make a difference. It's got to be, I mean, this is great. Breaking the phenotypic barrier is one thing. Breaking the philosophical barrier is quite another. Yeah. I mean, just things have got to change, and Mark, you and Daryl always bring us back to front, and I'm thanking God for that, because this is a consequential election. Everybody, Greg Palast keeps saying that this is the most important election of our lifetime. The fact is, Mark and Daryl Jones, Attorney Mark Fancher, Attorney Daryl Jones, every election is the most consequential one, because if you don't participate, the American project, the American experience does not work. It doesn't. Greg Palast?
Yes.
Oh.
Glad I could make it.
Woo! I'm so glad but you are in Georgia and you're meeting Daryl Jones there.
Yes, in Savannah on the 27th. And so I'm going to be showing the film Vigilantes Inc., America's Vote Suppression Hitmen, here in Atlanta, actually at the Norcross Cultural Center as part of the Urban Media Makers Film Festival. And the event will be hosted by the chairwoman of Rainbow Push, C.K. Hoffler, great trial attorney, and another great trial attorney, Gerald Griggs, president of the NAACP of Georgia. We'll also have Nsé Ufo, who was the CEO of the New Georgia Project. So it's going to be a hell of a crew, but we're going to be watching, first, we're going to be watching the film Vigilantes, Inc., America's New Vote Suppression Hitmen. They are all stars in the film, and you get to meet them. And Major Gamaliel Turner, retired U.S. career military officer, African-American. Why is he there? because these self-proclaimed vigilante vote fraud hunters challenged this African American soldier's right to vote. In fact, 4,000 people were challenged in Columbus, Georgia, not by the government, but by a self-proclaimed vigilante. He's chairman of the Republican Party in Columbus, and he challenged 4,000 Americans, stopped them from voting. Almost all of them were African American soldiers who were assigned to other military bases, like Major Turner. They made a mistake when he knocked out Major Turner's vote, because Major Turner actually ultimately flew 5,000 miles round trip to get his vote back. He had to bring in Mark Elias, who is the attorney for Kamala Harris, who flew in from Washington to go to federal court to get his one single vote counted. No white person had to go through that. Not one single white person had to go through that. And the sad thing is you'll find out. So you'll meet him in our film. You'll meet him in person if you're there at the 25th. The other thing we can do, we're going to try to
The
get
25th or 27th. When is the Norcross showing?
It's 25th this coming Friday at the Norcross Center. Go to gregpalace.com and you can get the info. GREG. You see my name down there. Just gregpalace.com. Now we're going to try to do a showing in Savannah with Daryl and the Transformative Justice Coalition. The other thing we'd like to do, and now here's the good one. Here's the fun part. Here's the easy part. Grab your popcorn, because Leonardo DiCaprio has launched a website for us called SaveYourVote.org. It's in the chat box, SaveYourVote.org. And you can go there. You can, number one, check your registration. And states like Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, you can re-register on election day if some vigilante nutcase has challenged you. And you can at SaveYourVote.org, SaveYourVote.org, or gregpalace.com. You can stream the film Vigilantes Inc. for nothing. And as Santita, who's seen it at least twice.
I've seen it several times.
Times. And so is your dad, the Reverend, has seen it several times. So is Daryl Jones. And they can tell you, it's a movie, it's a documentary, but it is entertaining. It'll keep you going through it, and you'll laugh at some of it. You'll cry at other parts. And if you don't laugh and cry, I'll pay for your therapy. So go to SaveYourVote.org and hit that, check my registration, then watch the film. There's also the number. If you run into trouble, I've put in Daryl Jones's number, and Rainbow Push, and several other phone numbers are on there to reach the flying teams of lawyers who can help you out if you run into trouble. So save your vote, not save my vote, SaveYourVote.org, to see the movie gratis, to check your registration, to get the voter protection numbers and advice on how you can save your vote from these vigilante freaks. And I got to tell you, one of the stories quickly is that that Major Gamaliel Turner, he was challenged by as I said, the chairman of the Republican Party in Columbus. And the guy actually dresses like a vigilante, cowboy hat, cowboy boots, and pearl-handled six-gun in a holster, which he made the point that it was quite loaded, that it was a loaded gun. And we asked him, do you know whose home you're being filmed in? And he said, no. Well, meet your host. And Major Turner comes out, and I said, you've challenged this man's right to vote and 4,000 others.
Black man.
All black men. And, do you want to apologize to the major? He was assigned to another base by the President of the United States, by Mr. Trump, in fact. Do you want to apologize to this man? And he wouldn't. You'll see that story there. Some pretty interesting confrontations, including with the governor of Georgia. We go to Texas, we go to Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, and you'll learn something that will blow your mind, including about the history of enslavement and its connection. We were talking about that earlier. Dr. Stan Deaton, head of the historian here in Georgia, said, look, the entire purpose of the Ku Klux Klan, it had one purpose: stop black people from voting after the Civil War. That was their entire purpose. And he called it the armed wing of the Democratic Party. And so the Ku Klux Klan was not about hating black people or keeping them in line. It was he said it had one core purpose, and that was to stop black people from voting after the Civil War. So the South could rise again, which it did. And you'll see that in the film. And you can't take the history of vote suppression now without knowing the history of vote suppression then. First, enslavement. You certainly can't vote if you're enslaved. And then the Ku Klux Klan, the Black Laws, end of Reconstruction,
Wait a minute.
finally Jim Crow.
Citizenship, because Black
Citizen-
people had to get citizenship.
That's right.
People, let's not forget, Attorney Jones, we had to be freed from slavery, unless you go to prison. But then we had to become citizens. That too was a fight.
Mhm.
And then the vote was after
right.
that. But I think that people will be surprised, Attorney Jones. I wasn't, because I know we do coalition politics. You didn't stop at Black people.
No.
You talked about the Latino community.
Right.
You showed what's been happening to the Asian community.
Yes.
Explain.
Well, what people don't realize, yes, there are 30 million African American voters, but there are 15 million eligible Asian Americans. They have the lowest voter participation of any ethnic group. Because when I talk to the, for example, I went to visit a group. You'll see in the film, I go to visit a group called 10,000 Koreans Vote. They're trying to reverse this idea that Asians are, they don't want to create waves in their, I'm told, in their community. And so, but one lawyer, Helen Ho, said, well, I'm going to register 10,000 Koreans. We're going to have this group called 10,000 Koreans Vote. They registered about 4,000 in their first round. They sent it to the Republican Secretary of State at that time, Brian Kemp, who, the names didn't appear on the voter rolls. And so Helen said, where we have all these Korean Americans who've registered, where are their names? And they said, oh, we never got those names from you. He said, well, I have the registration forms. We photocopied the registration forms. So we know we sent them to you. We got them here. And they said, oh, really? And the next thing they knew, their door was kicked in by a bunch of RoboCops in full military gear and automatic weapons. They seized their computers. They threatened every one of the elderly Korean American voter registrars. They threatened them with felony crimes for ballot tampering, registration form tampering by photocopying. Because they photocopied them for a very simple reason, because they didn't trust Brian Kemp to put those names on, and he didn't. So they held felony charges over these elderly Asian Americans for 2 years. Then they dropped the charges, of course, because it was ridiculous. In the meantime, they destroyed that voting rights group. So Asian Americans are under attack. And the reason they're under attack is that until 2000, Asian Americans voted majority Republican. Now they vote almost identical to the African American community. About 75, 80% vote Democratic. So that's why they become a target. So as soon as you vote the wrong way, your group is going to be targeted. And that's what, and you'll see that in the film Vigilantes Inc. I hope, grab your popcorn, go to saveyourvote.org. I have to go because I have an appointment. I didn't realize
Sending you so much
I'm
love.
off on my time. I have my time zones wrong here.
No, it's okay. We're really glad that you were with us. Going to get you again as you are down there.
Oh yeah,
because we want to
absolutely.
hear. But sending you much love. Go on. We have to share you with the world. Alas, I cannot keep you to myself.
Okay, thank you, Santita, and see you at the movies. SaveYourVote.org. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Great.
But you know, it's also interesting when I was one of my best sister friends. She made her transition. Candace Simmons, brilliant first-rate mind. Went to Yale when she was 15 or 16. Brilliant. And she said, you know, the Asian community is very interesting because she was in college just beyond me. Well, we overlapped for like a year. And so we were both in school when the South African movement, the anti-apartheid movement had just gathered. You had shanty towns at predominantly white institutions, the major ones. And college kids were really getting involved. I was arrested at the South African embassy in Washington, as were my brothers Jesse and Johnny. They were arrested with my dad. I was not. I was by myself. No, I wasn't. I was with Congresswoman Carter Collins, God bless her soul, and a wonderful nun. But what was interesting, I remember she made the observation. She said, you know, the Asian community is very interesting. They go from being extremely conservative to being extremely progressive. And maybe it's because they're the readily identifiable other also. Because one of the things that was a very, very pleasant surprise during Dad's first presidential campaign in '84, when my parents got out to California, they were running the campaign.
Mhm.
I mean, you know, you have Chinatowns and Asian pockets all over California because that's their point of entry, you know, and like you have European uh, setups coming east, moving west. Coming west, moving east, you have Asian because that's how they, you know, we do what we how we got here. You know, wherever we came in, that's where you'll see us thrive, and you'll see us really stamp our identities in these places. And we saw, oh my gosh, by the time we got to the Democratic Convention in '84, in July of '84, we were going to Chinatown in San Francisco, you know, to get the food and to walk around because it's just beautiful and so much that you could see. And they would tell us that if they saw that we had Jackson buttons on, they said, oh, your money's no good here.
Mm.
Sit down and eat. They're like, whoa, no, we got to pay you something. They're like, no, money no good here. Money no good here. Sit down and eat your Jesse Jackson. And you could hear that they had immigrated. But then some of them, their children who were my parents' age and older, their parents had been interred in the camps. And they never forgot that.
Mhm.
And so a lot of the tension that is orchestrated between Black and Asian people, it is orchestrated. You need to know that because some of our strongest allies have been the Asian community, the Asian American community, because they carry the pain of their history with them. So in California, as you have seen, some Asians, some tear apart affirmative action, you've seen another group that's even larger affirm affirmative action. And it's important for us to know that. That's why when you see this movie, I want you to understand that while Greg illuminates Black examples, he also takes you into this Korean American group and you
Mhm.
see how they have been harassed and how they have been threatened with prison time. And the intersectionality of it all is what's so interesting. The last 2 minutes I want to give to you, Daryl. Why are you in Georgia? I mean, you could be in Michigan, you could be in Wisconsin, you could be in a lot of places. They're battleground states where we have massive voter issues. Why are you in Georgia?
Well, Santita, Georgia really is ground zero when it comes to voter suppression. We know from their Senate Bill 202, where they were trying to stop people from being fed pizza and given water while they're in lines, waiting to vote, that the voting electors created by closing polls in predominantly Black areas. We know that Georgia is ground zero for all of that. That all the Florida stuff that they're doing came out of Georgia. Many of the stuff coming out of the suppressive techniques that are used in Texas came out of Georgia. So Georgia is ground zero for it. That's part of the reason that we're in Georgia. But I tell you what else, folks need to remember Ahmaud Arbery and what happened to Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, in rural Georgia. Why do I say that? Because one of the things that we talk about is in the rural areas. The rural areas are where African Americans and others that don't make up a significant population feel the oppression of the folks that are there with regards to casting their votes and being employed and things along that line. I say remember Ahmaud Arbery for this reason. This Friday, the family of Ahmaud Arbery, the Arbery family, is going to be leading folks to the polls to vote because that was all about voting. They will be going to early vote in Brunswick, Georgia. And I encourage you, wherever you are, if you have early voting this Friday, cast your vote this Friday with the Arbery family, remembering the struggle that they went through, remembering that it was the prosecutor in that case that lied to this family, that wasn't going to have his three white killers brought to justice. And she was up for re-election. And she was unopposed. But the Arbery family and the public got together. They got another name on the ballot, although it was beyond time for anyone to be able to put their candidacy in. They were able to get the names together to get a candidate on the ballot, and then push that person. And for the first time in Glenn County history, a sitting prosecutor was defeated during the election. We encourage you this Friday when the Alberry family goes to vote in Georgia, that wherever you are, if you have the ability to early vote on Friday, vote with the Arbery family. Vote with justice in mind, because that's what they're going to be doing. So, Santita, that's the big push that we have. That's part of the reason we'll be in Brunswick, Georgia. I'll be in Atlanta, Georgia for the, we have a whole thing we're doing with the National Bar Association, election protection. We'll be on the grounds, some of the polling places. We'll be taking in issues that are occurring. We'll be in Savannah, Georgia on Saturday and Sunday with Greg Pallish, not only showing vigilante, but we'll be taking people to the polls in Savannah. We'll be at Savannah State University's homecoming, registering people, getting them out to the polls. This is the reason we're in Georgia, Santita, is to let folks know we will stand with you. We will walk with you. We'll go to the polling site with you to cast your ballot. That's why we're in Georgia, Santita.
Of course, every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, WAOK. You'll hear Attorney Daryl Jones and Attorney Barbara Arnwine. You can also go to barbaraarnwine.com, ARNWINE, barbaraarnwine.com, and download that show. Listen to it, stream it live, and go to WOL. It's one of our Black-owned stations that is independent, and we need to keep them alive. But remember what Attorney Daryl Jones just told us. After Ahmaud, Arbery. Is it Arbery or Arbery? Because, when I'm south, it's Arbery.
Arbery.
When I come up here, it's Arbery.
Right. In the south, they say Arbery.
And, but when he was killed, it was his family who used the vote, Daryl. Thank you for that reminder. They used the vote to get justice for their son. They used the vote. The jury process is part of the vote. If you're not a registered voter, you can't be on the jury. They found that corrupt prosecutor and they said, we will vote you out. And by the force of our political activism and activity, you might be going to jail, my sister. It's all because you're voting. Please, please get registered to vote. And please, if you're not wanting to vote, I don't care if you're black, brown, yellow, red, or white. We're all a family, everybody. We're one family. And in order to make America work, it works when you work it. You got to vote. You got to vote. I'm not going to make an appeal for you to vote one way or another. I'm not. I want you to be engaged. I want you to make some informed decisions. That's why I try to bring in information here. First thing I want you to do is vote. Please do that. That's what we need. We need you to do that. We need you to vote. You need you to vote. And you need to get some souls to the polls. Everybody needs to get there. Everybody needs to get involved. Because everybody's feeling some kind of way anyway about this, Daryl Jones. So it's going to come up anyway. Just vote. Please vote. Get involved. And praying your traveling grace and mercies as you get down to, I was about to say to Virginia, I must have my grandma Gertrude on my mind today as I think about the vote. And I think, hey, this is my mother's mother. Gertrude Brown. Yep. Wow. Yep. She was a migrant worker. She was orphaned when she was 11. And then she went on to have her first child at 14, got married at 18, and gathered her family of 5 children, got them all to college. And then she went and got a GED, an associate's degree, and then a degree from Hampton at 61, and then her master's from Virginia Union at 65. Bless her heart. Vote. Vote for your grandma. Vote for the ancestors. There you go. God bless you, everybody. I'm Santita Jackson, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. God bless you. So you have to keep it with me every day, Daryl. AM 950 Radio, everybody. God bless.